Many of you may have heard of the Pareto principle or the Pareto distribution in passing, or perhaps you've studied it more in depth if you have ever taken a statistics course. But not many people know just how much the Pareto principle, otherwise known as the 80-20 principle, is applied in everyday life. Whether it be in business, in society, even in our home lives, the 80-20 principle has a firm grip on every single facet of our existence. The use of the 80-20 principle by business people, computer enthusiasts, and quality engineers has helped to shape our modern world, and yet it has remained one of the great secrets of our time. The good news is that you can use the 80-20 principle to your advantage, and many insanely successful people have used this principle in order to get ahead in their chosen endeavors. You're watching Wealthy Buddha, and today we're diving deep into the 80-20 principle and how it works, and how you can use it to achieve massive success. The pattern underlying the 80-20 principle was discovered in 1897 by Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto. Pareto happened to be looking at patterns of wealth and income in 19th century England when he found that most income and wealth went to a minority of the people in his samples. Perhaps this was not surprising, but he further discovered that there was a consistent mathematical relationship between the proportion of people as a percentage of the total population and the amount of income that this group enjoyed. In other words, the distribution of wealth across the population was predictably imbalanced. Pareto's other finding, the one that really excited him, was that this pattern of imbalance was repeated consistently whenever he looked at data referring to different time periods or different countries. Was this a freak coincidence, or something that had great importance for economics and society? The 80-20 principle asserts that a minority of causes, inputs, or effort usually lead to a majority of the results, outputs, or rewards. Taken literally, this means that, for example, 80% of what you achieve in your job comes from 20% of the time spent. Thus, for all practical purposes, 4/5 of the effort, a dominant part of it, is largely irrelevant. This is counterintuitive because we tend to expect that all causes will have roughly the same significance. But the 80-20 principle states that there is an inbuilt imbalance between causes and effects, inputs and outputs, and effort and reward. There are many examples of this. In business, 20% of products usually account for about 80% of dollar sales value. So do 20% of customers. In society, 20% of criminals account for 80% of the value of all crime. 20% of motorists cause 80% of accidents. In the home, 20% of your carpets are likely to get 80% of the wear. 20% of your clothes will be worn 80% of the time, and so on and so forth. If you're wondering why this pattern is ever persistent in so many different areas, there is scientific reasoning behind it, and it has to do with a theory in physics known as chaos theory. Without going too deep into the subject, chaos theory states that there is a self-organizing logic lurking behind complex systems which we would describe as chaotic. Both chaos theory and the 80-20 principle assert, with a great deal of empirical backing, that the universe is unbalanced. Both are dealing with the fact that some forces are always more forceful than others, and will try to grab more than their fair share of resources. The 80-20 principle is also consistent with and can be explained by reference to the feedback loops identified by chaos theory, whereas small initial influences can become greatly multiplied and produce highly unexpected results. For example, the rich get richer, not just because of superior abilities, but because riches produce more riches. A similar phenomenon exists with goldfish in a pond. Even if you start with goldfish almost exactly the same size, those that are slightly bigger will become very much bigger. Because even with only slight initial advantages in stronger propulsion and larger mouths, they are able to capture and gobble up disproportionate amounts of food. It is only because of negative and positive feedback loops that causes do not have equal results, and we typically end up with 80-20 relationships. In the absence of feedback loops, the natural distribution of phenomena would be 50-50. So how can we use this knowledge of the 80-20 principle to our advantage? Understanding the 80-20 principle gives you great insight into what is really happening in the world around you. This has many applications. At the heart of each would be the process of substitution. Resources that have weak effects are not used, or used sparingly, and resources that have powerful effects are used as much as possible. In this video, we're going to focus on how those who are truly ambitious can use the 80-20 principle to advance in their chosen careers and reach the top of the Pareto distribution in terms of success in those careers. The 80-20 principle is nowhere more evident today than in the very high and increasing returns enjoyed by very small numbers of elite professionals. We live in a world where the returns for top talent in all spheres of life have never been higher. A small percentage of professionals obtain a disproportionate amount of recognition and fame, and usually also a high percentage of the riches available. Take any sphere of contemporary human behavior in any country or globally, whether the sphere be athletics, football, basketball, golf, tennis, gymnastics, or any other popular sport, or architecture, sculpture, painting, or any other visual art, or music of any category, the movies or theater, novels, cookery books, or even hosting TV chat shows, news, politics, or any other well-defined area, there will be a small number of notable professionals whose names spring to mind. There is a big difference between being at the top and well-known to all, and being almost at the top and well-known only to a few enthusiasts. The best-known basketball or football stars can make millions. Those just below the top rank only a comfortable living. So what does all of this mean to the ambitious? You may want to give up and refuse to compete in a world where the odds against mega success are so long, but this would be the wrong conclusion. Even if you do not aim to be a world-beating millionaire, but especially if you do, there are some golden rules for successful careers in an increasingly 80-20 world. First of all, specialize in a very small niche. Specialization is one of the great universal laws of life. This is how life itself evolved, with each species seeking out new ecological niches and developing unique characteristics. A small business that does not specialize will die. An individual who does not specialize will be doomed to life as a slave wage. It is better to know a few things well, preferably one thing exceptionally well, than it is to know many things superficially. If the unproductive 80% of workers specialized in what they are good at, they could become the productive 20% in another sphere. Specialization requires very careful thought. The narrower the area, the more important it is to choose it with extreme care. Choose a niche that you enjoy and in which you can excel. You will not become an acknowledged leader in anything that cannot command your enthusiasm and passion. Almost anyone who has made it to the top has done so with great enthusiasm for what they are doing. Enthusiasm drives personal achievement and also infects others with enthusiasm, creating a multiplier effect. You cannot feign or manufacture enthusiasm. If you are not enthusiastic about your current career and you are ambitious, you should stop doing it. But before you take this step, work out a better career. Write down all of the things about which you are enthusiastic, then work out which of these can be made into a career niche. Secondly, realize that knowledge is power. The key to making a career out of enthusiasm is knowledge. Know more about an area than anybody else does. It is not enough to know a lot about a little. You have to know more than anybody else, at least about something. Do not stop improving your expertise until you are sure you know more and are better in your niche than anybody else. Then reinforce your lead by constant practice and entrenched curiosity. Do not expect to become a leader unless you really are more knowledgeable than anyone else. It's a good idea to try to find current leaders in the niche you're pursuing and learn from them. Leaders do things differently. They're usually outsiders. Those who are the best in any sphere do not think and act in similar ways to the average performers. They always find ways to make 20% of effort yield 80% of results. There is no fun in work unless you can achieve a lot with a little. If you have to work 60 or 70 hours a week in order to cope, if you feel that you are always behind, if you are struggling to keep up with work's requirements, then you are in the wrong job, or doing it completely the wrong way. Ask yourself which people in your sphere are achieving 80% of their results from 20% of their efforts, and choose those for whom to learn from. Be willing to pay a high price to work for and learn from the best. Find any excuse to spend time with them. Work out what their characteristic ways of operating are. You will find that they see things differently, spend time differently, and interact with other people differently. Unless you can do what they do, or something even more different than what they do, you will never rise to the top. Next, become self-employed early in your career. First, leverage your own time so that you can focus on the things where you add 80% more value than elsewhere. Then, ensure that you capture as much of this value for yourself as possible. The ideal position, one you should aim for early in your career, is to capture all of the value of your work for yourself. The employee who uses the 80-20 principle will probably be many times more effective than the average. They are also most unlikely to be paid several times what his or her peers are. Therefore, an 80-20 employee would probably obtain a much better deal by becoming self-employed. When you are self-employed, you get paid by results. For those who use the 80-20 principle, this is good news. The one circumstance in which it may not be appropriate to become self-employed is when you are still in the rapid learning stage. If a corporation or professional firm is teaching you a great deal, the value of this learning may exceed the differential between the value you add and what you are paid. This is typically the case during the first 2 or 3 years of a professional career. When these periods are over, become self-employed. Do not worry too much about security. Your professional expertise and use of the 80-20 principle is your security. In any case, especially right now, corporations can no longer deliver security either. And finally, employ as many net value creators as possible. If the first stage of leverage is to make the best use of your time, and the second stage is to ensure that you capture the value you create for yourself, then the third stage is to leverage the power of other people. There is only one you, but there are a very large number of people whom you could potentially employ. A net value creator is one whose value comfortably exceeds their cost. Be smart with who you employ. Remember, the 80-20 principle is always at work, so some employees will always create more value than others. The only requirement is that your least effective employee still adds more value than he or she costs. You can achieve maximum effectiveness by outsourcing the work of anything but the core skill that you have chosen. For example, if you have a specialized niche in inventing product ideas, you should outsource the work of manufacturing, marketing, and advertising those products, so that you can focus the vast majority of your time on the inventive work that you've become the best at. By leveraging the work of others, you increase your maximum effectiveness to multiple times more than you can produce by yourself, even if you are the best. Remember, the idea is to make 20% of your own effort yield 80% of your results, and the best way to do this is to wisely outsource your work as your business grows. So there you have it, a surefire method of using the natural law of 80-20 to win the rat race and achieve massive success. As previously stated, many of the most successful people in the world have followed the steps outlined in this video, while also keeping the 80-20 principle in mind to come out at the top of their chosen careers. The 80-20 principle highlights that there is a tragic amount of waste everywhere, in the way nature operates, in business, in society, and in our own lives. The paradox is that such waste can be wonderful news if we use the 80-20 principle creatively. not just to identify low productivity, but to do something positive about it. There is enormous scope for improvement by rearranging and redirecting the steps we take in our lives to ensure we're receiving maximum profitability at every turn. By being aware of the 80-20 principle at work, you can improve any aspect of your life that you wish to improve. This video was for the ambitious, for the ones who feel the burning desire for ultimate success and achievement, and we hope you learned something from it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and from all of us here at Wealthy Buddha, thanks for watching.